Hello and welcome back to the Science Secure in Mind video and podcast series. My name is John Solomon with the Cybersecurity Advisors Network. We're a global not-for-profits trust network of information security professionals, as well as those working in related disciplines such as policy, technology, business, and law. I'm here today with Wim Hafkamp, who's the current managing director of the Dutch Z-CERT or Z-CERT. Again, please correct me if I'm pronouncing that wrong. This is the computer emergency response team for the Dutch healthcare sector. In addition to this, he's also the Secretary General of the European Health ISAC. And we've known each other since, I believe it was 2015, when he was the CISO for a large international Dutch bank. So, Wim, I've probably missed quite a few things. If you'd like to fill in any gaps in your impressive background and resume, I'd welcome that.
Thank you, John. You did quite good, to be honest. And also happy to contribute to this podcast. So, actually, 2 jobs at the moment, indeed. So, managing director of the Z-CERT Foundation, based in Amersfoort in the Netherlands. The Z stands for Zorg, which is the Dutch word for healthcare. So we serve more than 300 healthcare organizations in the Netherlands, hospitals, mental care organizations, elderly care organizations, etc. And January the 1st this year, I started as the Quartermaster and chairman of the new European Health ISAC, a new initiative we try to share and to exchange information on all kind of healthcare related cybersecurity topics. It's still a small group, to be honest. We are now with 30 CISOs from different organizations all over Europe, and we hope that will grow to many more.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting career trajectory because when you were in your bank role, you were one of the pioneering members of the Dutch financial services collective defense community, as well as the public-private cooperation system between the NCSC, the Banking Association or Payments Association, and the banks and other financial services firms. And as we've seen in the rest of the world, in Europe generally, the financial sector has been kind of at the forefront of collective defense, information sharing, and mutual assistance. But the healthcare sector is constantly in the news, from the massive ransomware attacks on the entire Victorian healthcare system in Australia in 2015-16. Recently, the Irish, more or less recently, the Irish healthcare system was taken down. And we've constantly got news of ransomware and destructive malware attacks elsewhere, in not only on the continent and within the EU countries, but generally in the world. What is your take on coming into this sector from outside, and how do you see the general level of preparedness and vulnerability of healthcare information security and IT compared to, let's say, as an example, financial services?
Well, I think the maturity is growing, but if I compare this with the financial sector, there's still a way to go, to be honest. We in the Netherlands, we have some, especially academic hospitals that are, they're quite mature in their way. But we also serve small youth care organizations that almost know nothing about cybersecurity. They've outsourced their complete IT infrastructure, and they have sometimes just one person that is responsible for IT, for quality, for finance, and also for information security. So there's a lot of work to do, but it's as I said before, it's growing, and I think the number of incidents that's happening at the moment and over the last year in the Netherlands, but also in Europe and the rest of the world is helping to become more aware of the situation and the problem. But I still feel that a lot of organizations are puzzling how to deal with it and what to do, what should be their top priority at the moment. Combined with a process of, let's say, we call it in the Netherlands versazing, so the transformation to the cloud is also happening within a lot of organizations. So that combination makes it a bit tricky, to be honest. So we try to help them try to make them more aware of let's say, more persistent threats, and but also in the long way, the digital transformation, we're trying to help them how they could or should do that in a secure way. So that's more or less our role.
So one of the paradoxical issues I've seen with especially, but not only healthcare IT is, let's just agree that all information security is underfunded, no matter what industry you're in. But healthcare, compared to many other industries, is probably one of the more critical national industries. It's one thing I always try to get across to my colleagues in financial services. Yeah, it's important to societal and economic functioning, but let's be honest, it'll take a while. Whereas if you take down a hospital, people will die. We saw that during COVID in Egypt when generators went out, things like that. Now, my experience in healthcare IT is fairly out of date. Information security, it's a couple of years old. Do you see, we have a lot of news about, overworked and underfunded healthcare professionals in Europe and elsewhere generally. Do you see the same as a major challenge for the information security preparedness level, information security groups? And do you think how aside from just, more money, how do you think that can be addressed?
Yes, good point. I see a lot of, let's say, willingness to work together and to share information. So even maybe more than in the financial sector, to be honest, because they often do have the money and the staffing. And I don't see that things all over healthcare sector. So that there's a need, but also a willingness to work together. But the funny thing, or maybe it's not funny at all, if I look at the NIST, the Network and Information Security Directive from the European Commission. So currently the NIST 1 is implemented a couple of years ago, but then in every country, let's say the ministries could decide whether their constituency, so the organizations that are part of that sector, would be critical or not. So they could decide themselves. The different, let's say, governments could decide themselves whether what was critical and what is not critical infrastructure. And in the Netherlands, the Department of Health decided 3 or 4 years ago that hospitals or all healthcare organizations are not critical. So there is no duty to report incidents in the Netherlands at the moment. There are no requirements for healthcare organizations related to cybersecurity. So a lot of organizations do a lot, but from a government perspective, there's, at least from the NIST perspective, there's no need at the moment. That will change, of course, with the NIST 2, which will come next year in 2024. Then the local, the national governments can't decide themselves anymore. So the European Commission decides what is critical and what is not critical. And healthcare is, of course, critical. So that will give, in my opinion, a boost to not only awareness, but also to, let's say, a requirement to come up with certain standards. Cyber security hygiene should be, let's say, should be there, and there's also a duty to report incidents, things like that. So that will change a lot, at least here in the Netherlands, in my opinion.
So that blows me away, and apologies for the background noise. We've got some people cutting iron out, cutting steel bars out front here. I hope that doesn't come across as too loud. That blows me away, actually, because I mean, my experience with especially the Dutch collaborative cybersecurity ecosystem, including the public-private set of collective defense capabilities, has been that it's been one of the kind of shining lights in Europe and very advanced, and to not designate healthcare as critical infrastructure. It sounds like NIS2 is coming exactly at the right time with this designation explicitly of, I think it was 15, 16 sectors as critical.
Correct.
That's good to see. Now, the European Health ISAC is a fairly new construct.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
One of my, just speaking very openly, criticisms of the Commission and its various bodies, the European Commission for our non-European viewers and listeners, has been that it's been very focused on member state structures. So your National Cybersecurity Center, your competent authorities, your CERTs, and mandatory incident reporting, with not sufficient information or attention being paid to the messy business of cross-border cooperation within a given industry and among industries. With the formation of the Health ISAC as an example, and the European ISACs community that you're also very active in, do you see that as changing? Do you see at a European level a greater understanding of the need to not only do but also support this kinds of reporting and collaboration across borders?
Well, maybe not at a level that everybody hopes at the moment, not, but there is a vision from the European Commission, or they start to create a vision, and the AG and ESA is also pushing this mission, so that's good. You see that a little bit in the new directives, so there is more focus on supply chain security, and the need to let's say come to certain standards for the whole supply chain. So that's the good news. But then again, if you're talking about cross-border, let's say sharing of information, especially sensitive information, that's still lacking at the moment, to be honest. And then that's also, I feel two things. We had our first meeting at the European Health ISAC. There's on the one hand, enthusiasm to share information. On the other hand, I also feel that some members said, okay, but we have to come up with some decisions and agreements on, for instance, PII information. If we want to share this, then we need to know that that's in safe hands. And of course, you know that things like IP addresses is considered as PII. So privacy is, well, it's still an issue here in Europe, and also a blocking issue to share sensitive information.
Well, I mean, healthcare data is about as sensitive, next to maybe pension information, is about as sensitive as it gets. One thing that I recall when GDPR was just beginning to enter into people's minds in the context of, for example, threat intelligence and attack information sharing, was concerns about, is this a GDPR issue? Now, you know as well as I do, the default response of a lawyer, if you ask them, can I share information, is niet, no way, nein. Yeah. But GDPR has explicit carve-outs for sharing of that kind of information. So we're not, in that sense, even if we do consider, for example, IP addresses of let's say botnet zombies, as part of PII, I think that's a stretch. But I think GDPR explicitly addresses that. Do you see different? I mean, given that GDPR has been around for, what is it now, 7-8 years almost? Do you see, is some of the reluctance maybe from different levels of maturity in implementing this across different European stakeholders, or what could be at the root of this concern about PII handling?
Sometimes I think it's used as an excuse to not share information, and it's because they don't know what the receiver will do with the information, whether that's they will get it back as a sort of a boomerang during, well, as you said, lawyers or the people that's taking this thing up and will use it against you. So I think there's a lot of hesitation, and they misuse the privacy law for this. And then sometimes I can I mean, I can understand this, but I mean, when you're in the middle of for instance, ransomware attack, it's not the first thing on top of mind to share IP address or other IOCs with people you hardly don't know in other EU countries. So I can understand it, but it is important because for me it feels like if a Belgian hospital or a group of hospitals had to deal with a ransomware attack, um, well, we need to know what's going on there and to prepare ourselves for maybe the same group of attackers. And everybody understands this, but still there is not an open flow and sharing of information uh, on an operational level, to be honest.
So this is where I see the dichotomy between a Z-CERT and a health ISAC as very interesting. Again, going back to the financial sector, when we're both in that together, one of the things that I think the sector realized very early on is that this is one of my eternal points of conflict with ANISA. Things cost money. You have to hire analysts, you have to hire operations people, platforms. You can't just meet every now and then. But on the other hand, there are some sectors where that conjunction of operational incident response, analysis, etc., and the higher level principles of general collaboration, not only threat intelligence, but security capability sharing came together very nicely. As CERT, by its very, or C-CERT, by very definition, is more of an operational construct than an ISAC without these kind of operational add-ons.
Correct.
Do you see that? I assume now, and hopefully you can talk a bit about this, that the Z-CERT is engaged in operational, for example, incident response, firefighting support for your constituents. Is that a model that you can see expanding to the rest of Europe, where there is a greater, let's say, hands-on support capability when something does catch fire?
In some countries, we see peer organizations like Z-CERT, but it's limited. For instance, in Norway, we have they call themselves HelseNet. HelseNet is a dedicated network for the healthcare industry over there. But for most of the times, these kind of capabilities, the things we do, are positioned within a national Z-CERT. And they don't only serve healthcare, but also energy, finance, etc., etc. So I hope our example will be copied to other countries, because I think that's needed. Because sometimes it's very specific. The issues we deal with, some are generic, but some are very, very dedicated to related to the healthcare sector. So I'm still, let's say, positive about our model, our Dutch model, and hopefully that will be copied to other countries as well.
Well, I think it's a growing not only set of capabilities, but also an awareness that's necessary. And as we all know, you tend to get funding and empowerment when something really bad happens, and hospitals are pretty constantly in the news in terms of being attacked.
Right.
I want to touch on your point about supply chain. Obviously, this is a major supply chain risk management in both DORA and NIS2 is a major element.
Yep.
In healthcare specifically, the device manufacturers, the in vitro diagnostics, the blood testing manufacturers, et cetera, under standards like, under constructs like HL7, have been building certain levels of security into their machinery since, I'd say, 2005, 2006, realizing that unpatched Windows XP control systems, laboratory information systems were not sustainable on open networks.
Mm-hmm.
And what we've seen with, for example, NIS2 and anytime after the European Cybersecurity Act in 2014 is the cloud service providers. You mentioned cloud, kind of more or less quietly went and set up their own European compliant cloud ecosystems. Where are the gaps? So what part of the supply chain is still vulnerable, and what area for specifically the healthcare providers needs to be addressed more strongly?
Oh dear, that's a very open question. Well, what we see in the Netherlands is see that a lot of applications which were, let's say, first managed on-prem are now transformed to SaaS applications. Electronic patient records, for instance, we see that the half of our constituency already used this as a SaaS application. So if the vendor is under attack, DDoS or ransomware, they immediately have a problem because they don't have a copy on-prem anymore. So they are very dependent on the availability of that application. On the other hand, we also seen good examples about vulnerability management where let's say the vendor has done an absolute good job on let's say patching, where we see that the organizations that do things on-prem were lacking and were a little bit behind with their patching schemes. So you can't say it's good or not good to go to the cloud. But for me, I think it's important that you let's say define the requirements, that you do your risk management, but also make good let's say how to say this, that you make agreements with the vendor, not only during let's say the purchasing phase, the contract phase, but also once it's let's say it's working and it's in production, that you make agreements about security testing, incident reporting, things like that. And we've seen that with a lot of organizations, they forgot to do this. And they said, okay, the organization, they have an ISO 27000 certificate, so that's okay. They're doing a great job, right? And then they got ransomware, and then hell breaks loose. How would say that in English?
I think it's a constant set of frustration. I think, ISO and NIST and whatever are baselines. Yep. Don't forget, it's a baseline.
Yep.
Do you think the cybersecurity certification framework is going to help the situation, especially as far as vendors and suppliers are concerned?
Well, that maybe could help because it looks after these kind of issues, of course. But in the end, it's the attitude of the vendor that's most important. And if you are in a negotiation phase with a vendor and you bring up topics like, we'd like to see a yearly security pen test report from your side, and the vendor says, oh, we don't give it to you, then it should ring a bell, of course, because why would they be open to you about their, let's say, security maturity, also in future?
I think it seems to me it's come a long way generally also in terms of culture, not only because of these expectations that have grown, but also or the international or national cooperation frameworks, but also the growth in severity and breadth of the number of attacks. I mean, I recall when I was doing hospital security device installations, the head of IT had his office in a little broom closet, full of 30-year-old printers, and I had to go. They had unshielded Cat4 cables running, for sensitive patient data running across fluorescent lights and things like that. So I think that's come a long direction. Now I want to, in terms of regulation, we've got on top of NIS2 and DORA, we've got the Cybersecurity Act came in force, I believe, 2019. What is coming for the healthcare sector? What do you think on the regulatory side of things in Europe and the Netherlands specifically is going to increasingly strengthen the position of the sector in terms of defense, but also in terms of the CISO, who was able to say, hey, we no longer have a choice to ignore this. We have to invest in this and we have to prepare.
Yeah. Well, the good thing is that in the Netherlands, we have a standard which is called the NEN 7510. So it's more or less the ISO 27000, but it's a bit more specific to healthcare. So they've added some controls which are, let's say, healthcare specific. And it's just one standard, so that's a good thing. And every healthcare organization, whether it's a hospital or an elderly care organization, in the future has to fulfill this standard. Has to it's mandatory, so they have to prove that they comply with this standard. So that's a good thing. What is a bit, let's say, uncertain is how this standard relates to the supply chain partners. So it's not clear at the moment whether they also have to comply with the standard. So the organizations like Philips in the Netherlands, quite a medtech vendor in the Netherlands, are they also do they also have to meet with this standard? Yes or no? And on the other, it's a Dutch standard, but as it's more or less comparable with the ISO 27000 standards, well, also international partners can meet that standard, in my opinion. So that's the good news. Just one standard for the whole sector in the Netherlands. And whether that's enough or not, I don't know. What we trying to push is that you have standards, which is describing how your cyber hygiene should be. So it's sort of a baseline, as you told before, but we also hope that, let's say, things like security testing will become a standard in healthcare. So we are now currently running a program which is called Zero, which is a red team program. So we've said that if you are on a certain maturity level, then you should do at least one red team exercise a year. At the moment, it's not part of that standard, but we hope that it will be part of that standard, because that's the only way to test whether your measures are working or not. And the other test is that you got hacked or attacked, then you know whether it's working.
And let's round out the conversation by talking about the fun stuff. So specific campaigns. We saw in December there was a major attack in France. There was, as you mentioned, a lot of activity in Belgium. Near me in Barcelona, there was a major hospital incident. There's a major ransomware incident. Can you talk a little bit about the types of attacks? Obviously, there's a lot of ransomware, a lot of destructive malware, a lot of information theft, blackmail. What are some of the general trends that you're seeing in terms of attacks on healthcare providers?
Yeah, what we often see is that that MFA, multi-factor authentication, is lacking. So the attackers could go in via stolen credentials, so use ID password, or known vulnerabilities. So these two things are also, let's say, baseline things, hygiene, but that's still often the case. Sometimes also combined with, well, let's say, for instance, we've seen, let's say, the misuse of macros, office macros, in combination with phishing attacks. So it's, I think if the cyber hygiene is okay, then you will stop at least 90% or 90% of the current attacks. So that's what we're telling our constituency members. Stay focused on the baseline controls, because that actually helps you defend from serious attacks.
So nothing exotic here. I mean, this is all things that can be maybe not entirely. Obviously, there is no 100% security, but simply by practicing, well, good practice, and as you said, cyber hygiene. Now, we've seen a couple of actors, without going too much into specifics, but we have guys like, Hive and Venus and similar actors,
mm-hmm.
I think, hitting hospitals because it hurts a lot. And you're probably going to be more willing to pay up if you've got patient lives at stake. Now, I think the main miscreants have been ransomware actors. Correct me if I'm wrong. Recently,
Sorry,
the main bad guys, the main bad actors have been ransomware actors. I mean, pure profit motive. Is that more or less right?
that's more or less right. We've seen some actors focusing on DDoS attacks. So Killnet is one example, for instance. More hacktivist groups, but the ransomware gangs are well, that's a serious threat still a serious threat for a large part of the healthcare sector. Correct.
I find it astounding that a hacktivist group would target a healthcare organization. Go after somebody else. Jesus.
Yeah.
One question that I want to close out with. The concept of critical infrastructure, critical national infrastructure, critical industry, whatever, has seen a lot of growth in visibility and awareness over the last, let's say, 5 or 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
We've also seen, with for example, exercises like locked shields and increasing willingness on the part of not only the national cybersecurity agencies and centers, but also the defense actors, the military agencies, NATO, to understand the criticality of the key pillars of society, if you want to call it that, as part of a national cyber defense. Have you seen any indication that, whether it's in connection with, the Russian war in Ukraine, whether it's with North Korean, Lazarus, whatever activity, Chinese activity, any other state actors for all I care, Iran, have you seen any indications that especially European healthcare is at least considered a viable target for a state actor trying to make a point?
That's a good question, and also difficult to answer. That there were some, let's say, hints, especially during COVID, that the more, let's say, research organizations in healthcare, academic organizations were targeted, um, uh, and state actor related targets. For now, as we've seen, ransomware groups are, well, maybe sometimes are supported, or they well,
Or at least tolerated.
tolerated. Yeah, and in Europe, it's mainly pointing out to Russia, to be honest, to the war in Ukraine. But we can't make the connection with state actors, to be honest. But there are some research say that they are related, and there are some relations between the hacktivist group or ransom groups and well, state actor activities. But we can't find any hard evidence for this.
Fair enough, and I think those kinds of attributions are probably also more in the court of, again, the national cybersecurity, the law enforcement, the defense agencies. I think the American, if you look at the White House cybersecurity strategy, we also did a very nice video chat on that recently. I'll link to that in the description.
Yeah.
You look at the EU cybersecurity strategy, the proposed creation of the joint cyber unit. I think there is a growing understanding of a need to incorporate at least preparedness for those kinds of actors into a collective defense scenario.
Yeah, yeah. So what we've seen, to be honest, that's sometimes, and it's not state actor, but we've seen the reuse of, let's say, more or less the way of working of criminal actors who the way they attacked financial institutions in the past, and then they use the same tools and techniques later on in the healthcare sector. So in that sense, we can learn a lot from other sectors as well. But the relation to state actor is quite, and the attribution is not easy done.
Especially because, yeah, as we said, that the relationship is sometimes very fluid range. It's a whole continuum of relationships from a military agency all the way to a bunch of guys who are allowed to work within the borders as long as they don't go,
Exactly.
to domestic companies.
Yep. Exactly.
So I guess that's a good message, I think, and I one where, again, coming from the financial sector, so I keep harping on this. My hope had always been that the level of maturity in that sector was one that other sectors could learn from and benefit from. I do want to, if any of the ransomware actors are watching this, I'm not going to tell you whom to go after, but please leave hospitals alone. That's not nice. I want to give you the opportunity, if you'd like to close out with any points that you want to make, any observations, predictions, anything like that.
Well, if you're working for let's say not the healthcare sector, and you get a question or a help request from them, please help them. It's also it gives some let's say good sense of feeling if you can help society and help peers who are working every day in this this sector, and any help is welcome. So I've stepped from financial sector to healthcare sector, and did that 3 years ago, and I enjoy every day. I haven't. We say this. I should have done this earlier. this really the best thing I did over the last years to well, let's say help healthcare to become more mature on this topic, and hopefully this will help other organizations as well. So if you get this request, please help the CISOs over there.
You heard it here. It's good. It's good karma, and people will thank you for it, and you'll feel better about yourself. Absolutely. So I will link to as many of the concepts and in piece of information, rules, organizations, etc. in the video description below. Thank you very much, Wim Hafkamp. I appreciate your taking the time for this conversation. I will link to Wim's LinkedIn bio, as well as the Z-CERT and the European Health ISAC. Any information that Wim allows me to share, I'll provide that below, and how to get in touch. Thank you very much again. I wish you and your constituents security and easy weekends without any ransomware attacks. And for the rest of you, stay safe, stay secure, and see you in the next one.
Thank you, John. Bye-bye.